The word, the word. Switch the bracelet on the word, the word. The word, the word. Switch the bracelet on the word, the word. The word, the word. Switch the bracelet on the word, the word.
Good evening. Welcome along to The Word on Blake 7. We're getting towards the end of Series A, and we are now at episode 11, and it's Bounty, which was transmitted on Monday, the 13th of March, 1978. And as always, I shall start our wonderful podcast with a review from the original Bible, the program guide, to give you an overview of the story. The Federation have been interfering in the affairs of the planet Lindor and have fixed an election in order to ensure the defeat of President Zarkov. The president has been taken to an unnamed planet and held under a loose form of arrest whilst the Federation develops its grip on Lindor. In order to prevent the planet from falling completely into Federation hands, Blake and Callie teleport down to where Zarkov is being held in the hopes of convincing him of the need to travel back to Lindor and take command once more. Whilst Blake and Callie are working their way into the ancient house in which the ex-president is held, the Liberator picks up a distress call and goes after the ship that is emitting it. On Lindor, Blake and Callie find Zarkov and his daughter Tice surrounded by a collection of 20th century Earth artifacts. Along with Tice, these are apparently all that he now values, and he has little desire to return to his planet, harbouring bitter feelings that his people have rejected him. Tice, however, is tired of her father's inactivity and seeks to help Blake and Callie in their plan to re-inspire him. Back on the Liberator, Gan is teleported across to the ship from which the distress call was emanating, only to find that a trap has been set by a group of Amazons who wish to capture the Liberator and its crew and sell it to the Federation at a tremendous profit. The Amazons capture the crew, and when Blake, Callie, Zarkov, and Tice teleport back too, they are captured. It appears initially that Jenna has made a deal with the Amazon leader, Tarvin, whom she had known during her smuggling days. However, she double-crosses Tarvin and knocks out two of the guards before Avon breaks free from the room in which the crew are being held. The Amazons are then overpowered. Zarkov finally gives in to Tice's request that he be transported back to Lindor and once more take up government of the planet. So that is the episode. As always, go through my questions with the panel and overall view of this episode. Then Nick, from your perspective, give us your thoughts on the storyline and the script, and maybe how you think it could have been improved.
I'm just slightly distracted because as you were doing your preamble there, I just sort of looked down the screen and saw Dave's name for the evening. Somewhat threw me off.
He does this, and he's come dressed for the occasion. We'll come to Dave in due course, but we'll let everybody admire his wonderful costume for now.
I have quite fond memories of this one from a kid. It's one of the ones I remember from its original broadcast when I was a wee bairn. And for some reason, I think the thing that sort of caught my imagination was the actual residence/prison that Zarkov's being held in. And I always thought that little bit on the top was sort of some clever adding to it by the...
What this?
That thing. yeah, that.
It's an improvement.
But it's actually all real. It's all architecturally there. It's a very unusual building. And as you can see, I went there with Eric Moore from Blake 7 in character. I went there with him in November last year, and we hopped over all sorts of fences and crossed fields to get as close as we could. But it's a cool place. In terms of the storyline, it is one I just enjoy. It's not necessarily the best story out there, but I quite like it. I did think there was a bit of an odd plot fall through in regards to the Amazons/Space Arabs, however you want to term them. In so much as they'd obviously hatched a plot with the Federation to capture Blake and his gang, and were lying in wait for the Liberators to come into view in the massive universe that they have available to them. They just happen to know. They just happen to know where the Liberator would be. But presumably, they'd been fed that information by the Federation, who'd agreed to pay them 13 million credits for the capture. But from the Federation's point of view, if they knew where Blake was going to be, why didn't they just do it themselves rather than paying some other devils 13 million quid to do it? It just seemed a bit of an odd thing to be going around doing. But that aside, I quite like the story as it bumbles along. I'm not so keen on the Amagons and their strange costumes. But generally, I enjoy it. I like the bits down on Linda. I think you get to see Callie being Callie. I thought the opening shot is great in that forest, and then she sort of appears in view looking all stealthy and agent-like. It did quite amuse me that I think the first thing she does, she sort of telepathically talks to Blake and says something like, "Don't speak or make a sound." And what does he do immediately afterwards? He goes crashing all the twigs, running up to her. I said, "Don't do that, not do it." But yeah, it's a story I enjoy generally. I think it's good. They could have done something different with the Amagons. I wasn't so keen on them. But if you ignore the sort of the ludicrous premise on which they're there in the first place, it's an enjoyable little romp.
Okay. Sounds like you enjoyed it. Neil, did you?
Yeah, it's got its ups and downs, isn't it? This one, to be fair, and I think Nick has broadly described the downs there. What the hell are the Amagons doing there, and why? And how the hell did they know that Blake was going to be there? So you have to kind of go off a little bit and think maybe there's been some kind of trap. Was Zarkov involved in that in some way? I don't know. Did they pick up some kind of comms between Blake and Tice? I don't know. And potentially that could have been delved into to make it a little bit more believable as to why they arrived when they did. So that's a plot hole for me. And the other, there's a few worrying things in the episode. One is how easily the Liberator is taken over by the Amagons, who are armed with these gas guns, which don't look very effective at all. Because if when they teleport aboard, I don't know, there's about 3 or 4 meters in there between the teleport desk and the teleport when they come in, are them guns and the gas gonna reach 3 or 4 meters to take out Jenna and Avon? I wouldn't have thought so. So that's a bit of an inconsistency there, or an unbelievable thing to happen for me. So, and that's kind of like key to the whole concept here. But I do like all the stuff on the planet with Zarkov and his base, where he's put it. That's nicely shot. All of that's nicely done, and I think the building itself and the interior is nicely done. And the whole concept of this self-pitying ex-political leader within there with his rather indignant daughter who's sick to death of him and his self-pitying ways. I think that's quite nicely done as well. So I like them parts, even though you could look on this story as 2 separate stories in one, or struggling to come together into one. And I think it does struggle a little bit, because once you get Zarkov and Tice on board the Liberator, they're not put into captive like the rest of the Liberator crew. They just sat there on the flight deck with the Amagons. So that doesn't make much sense to me either. And there's no sense of trepidation as to what's going to happen to them two either when the Federation turn up. So the Federation are going to get Blake and everyone else, but what's going to happen to Zarkov and Tice? Nobody really knows. And it's like they're almost ignored as soon as they go on board the Liberator, until the next bit when the Amagons and control are taken, got out of the way, and the Liberator is taken back into control by the crew. So that's a bit plot hole gappy for me. And Zen as well. Zen annoys me in this episode, I'm afraid. Bloody turncoat computer. I mean, all the way through Blake 7 and maybe a bit more moving on, you need to register with Zen to give it commands. But it appears that Tarvin is able just to ask Zen whatever he bloody likes, and Zen's going to give him any answers. And I just like that. That's a bit of a hole there as well. But aside from all of that, I love the Jenna's treachery bit and the crew's response to Jenna's treachery, and specifically Avon, who, Callie says, what do you take pride in, Jenna? She says survival. And then Avon says, at the expense of your friends. And Avon says friends, which is quite interesting there for him to use that word. And that's quite interesting, potentially out of character for Avon, but does it show that this crew are starting to become more together and as one there? So how can it be improved? It's called Bounty, so I assume the Bounty bit is the Amazons, to be honest, and holding the crew for Bounty. But it's 30 minutes in before that even starts, so the majority of the episode is not Bounty. So I'm just wondering whether it's mistitled to an extent. We also don't know who from the Federation's coming to rendezvous with Tarvin, which I find interesting. It would have been obvious for it to be Servalan or Travis, but it ain't. I actually find that quite good because it shows that the Federation is this big organization, perhaps with a number of different people running different strings within it. And this could well be someone else's plan to try and get Blake and the Liberty, not Servalan, not Travis. But we don't know. So I find that quite interesting as well. I do like Callie at the start. I think that works really well. We do get to see her being more like Callie that we met initially. And she does then practically as well use a telepathy, which hasn't been seen for quite some time, so that's good as well. And all the crew get something to say and do in this, which I think is quite good, even Gan. So I quite like that element of it as well. But the best bit for me is what is really coming out now is this double act between Villa and Avon. That's really starting to flourish now in the way that they poke jibes at each other, and the dialogue is really quite spot on there. So yeah, that's kind of my summary there.
Okay, good stuff. Dave, who has come suitably attired tonight with a new name again. Dave, what did you make of Bounty?
Are you talking to me?
I am, sorry, Coconut.
Thank you, Coconut. Well, my link keeps cutting out, by the way. I don't know if anybody else's is.
No?
My link keeps cutting out. The plot holes, I think, have been covered by everybody. It doesn't make a lot of sense, this episode. And as somebody's mentioned about the Federation, why don't the Federation just catch themselves? And a point that hasn't been mentioned is how Blake has all this intel about what's going on this other. Is it another chocolate planet, Lintor? So it's Bounty, it's Lintor. It's a pity we weren't heading to Mars at the end. We would have been all right. So he's Blake's got all this intel, which sort of suggests there's other people out there fighting the Federation, but we've had no evidence of this so far in the series. So I don't really understand that. Story doesn't make a lot of sense. I've got to be honest. I watched it twice today, and I didn't enjoy it at all. I found it quite dull. I've titled it Quentin Crisp in Space because of the start with our friend with the hat, and it's a bit like the naked civil servant at the start. I'm not keen on these things set on Earth because of the budget. I'm surprised that the castle wasn't a special effect. I was sure that was a poor special effect, yes, and that is real, is it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah. And then the usual problems. It's amusing me now that every time they land on whatever planet they land on, somebody's carrying that massive red cooling box, and every time they open the lid, it's got in exactly what they need. I don't know how he knew he needed a rope and a hook on the end, but it's clever how they do that. Other than that, I didn't really enjoy it. It might just be me, but I thought it was pretty dull. Didn't grab me at all. It's the only time I've seen somebody threatened by a butterfly collection, though. So that was something, that was a first. And I've got the usual problems with choreography, the fight choreography, and I don't understand how the Federation's taken over the galaxy when all of the Federation's soldiers can just be knocked over with, nothing really. I mean, Kala jumps down from the castle. She doesn't even make contact, and the guy goes down like a sack of potatoes, shall we say? And they were very amusing when they ran off. There was a couple of scenes where they trotted off, and the only thing I've seen funnier running was you, Steve.
I knew you were going to say that. I was prepared.
Yeah. So these guards are absolutely. They seem to get more pathetic as the series goes on. It's a mystery how the Federation's got so powerful. And that's about it, really. I've got other points to bring up when we get into costumes and effects. But
Okay, well, that's it. Listen, I mean, people who haven't watched our podcast before or listened to our podcast, Dave is not a Blake 7 fan. So our mission really is to try and convert him to be a Blake 7 fan. So we've done okay up to now, but this is probably the first negative review I've heard Dave give in 11 episodes. So, yeah.
Well, episode 2, I didn't like.
You didn't like episode 2. But
Episode 2 was really poor. Yeah.
You've got further than I thought you would, which is great. Lynn, give us your appraisal. Always difficult to go second from last because it's always my job to go last. But what's your view on this episode?
Okay, so overall, same as Nick, I remember enjoying it when I watched it the first time around. Watching it now, a couple more times, I still overall enjoyed it. When you boil it down, nothing much really happens twice. So you've got, I can't help feeling that Terry produced a reasonably thin script, even by his standards. And Chris Boucher has had to do a lot of filling in. So it is slow. Yeah. Everything takes a long time. Even though I enjoyed it. So overall, I still enjoyed watching it. But most people have picked up, the plot holes, the gaps in how we got here and why we're doing this. From an Intel point of view, I think there was mention of the cipher encryption machine. So I assume that what they've been getting is from Time Squad, isn't it, where they get that? So I assume that they've intercepted things there and then got in touch with people on Lindor or somewhere else. It's the only reason, and I guess it's feasible. I think overall there's a much more, the first, I guess a flag for Dave, the first of the more theatrically styled episodes. When you open with Callie in leopard print, you're not just going to get a whole load of space anoraks. And it's just more, the castle, said Nick, it's all a little bit bolder, a little bit more, a number of more episodes are going to be. So that's a little bit different. What else that people have not mentioned? I think Blake is at his back to his bullying best. I mean, he really is having a proper go. I guess he's zealous. He wants Lindor to be saved from the Federation, but he's pretty heavy-handed. As you said, he's smashing records. He's threatening butterflies. And this has an effect, right? He's picked his targets. That's okay. But he doesn't really seem to care at all what Sarkov thinks or wants. He's just going to drag him back. I was pleased to see Callie having more of that role, of her role. And again, watching it the first time, I was always delighted when telepathy came back because it was really sporadic. So at least that was used. And there was a reference to the fact she needed to practice it more. It's a shame that didn't keep happening. But it was good to see her with more of a proper role. I thought Corinthia West's Tice was really good, actually. She's young, idealistic still, as you said, fed up with the way that her father is behaving. Just to think ahead to the end of it, it's the only reason that idealism and that matches Blake somewhat is the only fairly flimsy reason I can see why they threw in the little flirting bit at the end. Now, I'm probably over-crediting somebody with doing that, but it's the only reason you could think of it other than to put that scene in at the end. What else? So, yes, Jenna, I mean, she swaggers around the Liberator like a boss, doesn't she, the entire time? Even before the Amagans arrive, she's in charge. Avon takes quite a back seat in this episode. He doesn't really. The interactions with Villa are great, and you get, I think, some of the lines we're looking about later. Some of the lines I put together, they were all from that early set of exchanges between them, and that is really nice to see. Gan had more to say than he's probably had in the last 3 or 4 episodes put together. But what jarred slightly for me as well was this: well, I'll go and investigate. Okay, I don't think he's ever been allowed out on his own before. But still. And then suddenly it's I'll go and investigate, and if it looks a bit odd or you don't hear from me, just blow it up. Which I've never seen. That seemed just odd. And it was thrown in, and we don't get anything like that again. Maybe it was an attempt by Chris Boucher to put more character into Gan, because we haven't really had much. But it came out of the blue a little bit. Random bounty hunters we talked about, but the link up with the Federation as well. I think that probably covers the storyline and the script. So overall, I enjoy watching it. It's fun. It's fairly silly. It's a bit slow and random. But I thought it was fun to watch.
So can I just jump on this?
Yeah.
It's actually well known that it was a very slim script that Terry Nation delivered, and Boucher, it was severely in the length, and Boucher had to fill it out. So he added Tice, for example, wasn't in the original script. He added the scene where Blake breaks Sarkov's record, so he added that. And it also leads me to wonder how much of the Jenna being in charge and Callie's involvement did he add as well, or did Terry Nation finally remember that he had some female cast members? I don't know, but I'm just thinking that maybe a lot of that might have been Boucher's hand.
Yeah,
that would make sense, wouldn't it?
I've managed to break the back of this book as well. Of course, we've had this book around for many months now. Series A, the Blake 7 production guide. This does give you some great insight into some of these episodes. I've been playing catch up with this, and fantastic book. So if you haven't got the book by Jonathan Helm, designed by Graham Robertson, who of course has been on the podcast, get yourself to Cult Edge on Facebook, and you'll be able to find it on there. Nothing to really add. I mean, listen. This is the first Blake 7 episode that I couldn't really remember the storyline. Again, the flaws that you've all picked out, I would agree with. There is huge flaws in this. The one that I'd heavily pointed out was Zen. The fact that suddenly Zen is now, where you've got to get registered with Zen, and he won't speak to you unless you register with him. Again, I guess you've just got to get the impression that maybe that happened, and he forced one of them to force Jenna to give him voice recognition. That was the way that I settled that in my mind, because obviously Jenna was free. Jenna would have been taken to Zen, and maybe she spoke to Zen and allowed Tarvin to do it as part of the ruse that she was on board with him to eventually take over. So that's how I got through it. I love the telepathy, and again, agree. I wish that had been a big part of Callie's character, because it was such a great idea, a great incentive. And when you watch the Blu-ray interviews with Jan on the new Blake 7 Blu-ray in the Liberation documentary, it's a fascinating insight into how she felt. She would have loved to have developed the character more with that, because she believes in telepathy for starters, and it was something which was completely underplayed, forgotten about, I think, because of the change of directors. We didn't have regular direction, people coming in with their own ideas, and clearly got lost again in the script writing by Terry Nation, and Terry being asked to write all the scripts for series 1, it's quite clear, as Neil said, that the scripts just get thinner and thinner as we get towards the back end of the series. Whether it was because he was losing interest, whether it was because he was struggling for ideas or content, who knows? But maybe that as well, that is why sometimes the flaws appear. I'll agree, choreography again, I would say it was 50-50. There was a couple of decent ones in this. But again, Dave's note about the Federation guards falling over too easily, it's so frustrating, because being an actor and knowing and having done these kind of fight scenes, I know how easy it is, and I just it's very easy to cheat it on a camera, and it's just so surprising that a lot of the directors at the time maybe just had never done it, had never had the knowledge of how to do it. I just don't know, but clearly just the fight scenes are the biggest letdown for me again in this series of Blake 7. The ship scenes in this, there's a variety of different scenes of the Liberator going backwards and forwards in it, and I did quite like that. I did find the whole Sarkov office thing a bit strange, but then what else did you expect, I guess, inside the medieval castle? And again, getting back to the Federation guards, not only are they chinned, as we would say in Newcastle, very easily, they're also like the Keystone Cops in this episode. The fact that Callie and Blake are climbing up the wall on a rope on one side, and they seem to be running around in circles that way. It's like a Benny Hill sketch at some points, and not one of them thinks about going inside, and checking on Sarkov, because if there is intruders, which they've established there is intruders, why didn't they go inside and check what was going on with Sarkov? And then the bizarre situation where you've got this car, which I'm sure was used in Doctor Who. That getaway is just ridiculous with Blake on the outside of the car, and the Federation, like, why didn't they shoot? They could have shot them. Those kind of flaws is unfortunately what makes it a bit of a nightmare, this episode. Thanks to the production diary, though, there was an interesting quote I found from Terry Nation about this episode, and he says, in Bounty, the Federation's plan was to send in a peacekeeping force, which was in fact an occupying army. That's what was happening at the time with Syria. He said, I guarantee that 99.9% of people who see that episode won't see any political significance at all. But Blake 7 is not just people tearing around in spaceships. So,
not even that.
Interesting from his perspective. That was the message he was trying to portray with this episode. But yeah, listen. Overall, I enjoyed it. I think, again, like a lot of the episodes, certainly in Series A of Blake 7, there are flaws. But when you're a Blake 7 fan, predominantly like myself, Nick, Neil, and Lynn are, and people who watch and listen to this podcast, those are the kind of things you're just prepared to forget. Some things you can't forget, of course. Like our good friend. But yeah, we always are prepared to forgive and forget in Blake 7, and we get through them and we enjoy them, and we always manage to find something that's positive. So that's our review of the story and the script and how we think it could have been improved. What's our thoughts then, Nick, on the director for this? And as I've mentioned with the direction, we have so many different directors. This particular episode was directed by Pennant Roberts. And of course, Pennant Roberts had directed Spacefall and Time Squad and Mission to Destiny, which we've already reviewed.
One of the things that sort of jumped out at me was I'd always assumed, and I'm not seeing anything contrary to this, that the teleportation process is a fairly instantaneous event. You disappear on the Liberator, you appear on your planet in the blink of an eye. But that sort of turned on its head towards the end when Blake and his crew escape. They've just been running around on that car, as we've just been discussing, and they get teleported up to the Liberator, and there's no one there. Well, who operated the teleport to get them there in the first place?
Now, was it Zen?
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that is as well.
As well, because Aurak always did that when Aurak comes. Sorry, yeah.
No spoilers.
But Zen didn't ever do it.
No. So how would that work then? Because they get back and there's no one there. So that was a bit of
another plot hole.
Weak point, I thought. The fight scenes. There was one where Jenna overpowers one of the Amagan guards, knocks him completely unconscious with a body kick. I'm sure that works. Might wind him a bit, but he's not going to be absolutely sparked.
Yeah.
So again, you'd think a director would pick up on that. But on the positive side, I thought the opening of it, with the opening shot in the forest that I mentioned earlier, with Callie and Blake sort of sneaking around trying to avoid the Federation guards, I thought that was really well done. I enjoyed that. I did put a little bit a comment about the Federation guards need to work on their team jogging. Was my note on there. Because they did look a bit daft as they sort of all trotted through the forest. He could have sort of sorted that one out.
The anthill mob.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Dave's got the right hat for that.
It's all very, well planned. This,
He uses telepathy. You know you were going to say that, Dave. But overall, I thought Pennant did a fairly good job.
Actually,
those few bits accepted. So I thought he was all right.
Okay, Neil.
Not a huge amount to add to that, to be honest. I mean, shots on the planet, Sarkov's hideaway, all nicely done. Some nicely done shots on the Liberator. And his Pennant Rob is his last. Blake 7 is the last one he directs. I think it's okay. I mean, what the script he's got to work for, he probably was looking at it going, "Oh, really?" But he did with his best that he could with it, apart from the obvious flaws that we've discussed already, and Nick has brought out quite well there. So, yeah.
All right, Dave. Director.
Well, it's, as we've said in previous episodes, it's difficult whether to, who to blame for. Is it the script or is it the special effects? What do you blame the director for? But I can't get past the fight scenes, everything that's been mentioned so far about the guards. I don't know why a director lets that go. He's filming the scene and somebody goes down like a sack of potatoes and they're unconscious. And he must realise at the time it looks pathetic. So, I mean, do you blame the director for that? I would, I don't know. It's, other than that, it's serviceable. I mean, did this guy do episode 2?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. That's why I don't like it. He's crap. And sorry, he's not serviceable. He's crap. No, I mean, you just don't know what to blame the director for. I just think he lets too much go. For me, he stretches credibility even in the science fiction episode. That's about it.
Okay, Lynn. Anything positive for Pennant?
Hey.
I do have a couple of things, which I think are direction. So, despite despite not knowing how they were teleported to an empty Liberator, I liked the empty Liberator shots. They introduced them. Something's gone wrong, but you don't know what. And I quite like those. They were quite simple, I guess, but they worked quite well for me. I thought Villa's indecision was lovely. Around, he's found out that that's not Gan talking. He's just started running. Does he run towards the teleport bay, or does he run back to the communicator to tell them? And I love that. I mean, that's Michael Keating, right? Making the best of that. But he needed to be directed for it, I'm sure. I'm picking up on that actually as well. When not Gan's voice, comes through the communicator, it's heard in both the teleport bay and the flight deck. But when Zen says that's not Gan, it's only communicated in the flight deck. And again, you'd have thought it could have been helpful and let them know elsewhere as well. But that's the small point. A couple more pieces that were a little bit odd and funny. Blake running across an enormous open field, right, to get back to Callie at one point. So surely someone, even some of those Federation guards, would have seen him. Yeah. And when he does arrive behind the tree, he's so puffed he actually can't talk particularly well, and he hasn't gone that far. So I quite enjoyed that. And the last piece, which was so all of the collars that Villa carefully undoes, and then asks at some point, well, who's going to take my collar off? Who did? No idea. Maybe he talked someone else through it, but it just suddenly dawned on me that he was taking all the rest of them off, and that didn't happen. Everything else has been covered for me. I'm glad it's Pennant's last one, even though this was a bit better than the others.
On the collars, the necklace collars, again from the wonderful Cult Edge series thing, it was improvised, that scene. There was a couple of parts of this script, as Neil has again quite rightly mentioned, was very short. So Pennant actually had an issue getting to the required episode time length. So a couple of scenes had to be added at the end to extend this episode. So the record that was played by Sarkov on the gramophone, that was never in the script. That was added to extend the episode. And another little interesting one was that record, I was waiting to see whether Dave knew who was on that record. Do you know?
I do.
But who was it?
I mentioned it later on, Steve. It's important later on. So
all right, okay. So, what I will tell you, which you won't know, is that the record that was supposed to be played on this episode of Blake 7 was actually an Elvis Presley record. But the cost of using an Elvis Presley record was far too much, so they didn't do that. But yeah, getting back to the booby trap necklaces, Pennant gave them the opportunity to improvise, so they improvised that scene. And so the answer to your question is nobody would know. Not even Terry Nation knows how Villa got that necklace off. Maybe it was Callie. If you watched it today, like I did, because that was, again, I was thinking, well, who is going to take Villa's off? Callie is behind watching Villa do it. So my mindset, again, this is me in defensive Blake 7 mode going, now, well, Callie obviously learned how to do it then. She's very clever. She's looked at it and that's what happened. But again, it never gets answered. I did like the use of music in this. Again, Pennant probably had to do a few fillers with a bit of, skulking around and a bit of music. There was a bit for Villa and stuff when he was walking around, and maybe that was down to that side of things. But yeah, again, it is that kind of director is in charge, of course, of these fight scenes and stuff, and just unfortunately the fight scenes do let us down. And right at the start, the Federation guards in that opening scene which introduces Cheney, I really liked it. Before the fight scenes, I thought Mark York playing Cheney was excellent. I thought he had that air of menace. I loved the fact that he lifted the mask off and he was talking, so it humanized the Federation a little bit. The rest of them had their masks on. But it went from a really good start for the Federation to downhill because of the comical running around, because of the running, because of the the dim-wittedness, and because they're just easy to beat, which is the downside, really. And I think there should have been another way for Blake and Sarkov and Tice to get away with Calliot. That getting into that motor car was just ridiculous. And the fact, what made it even worse was that they had to wind it up. I mean, get out and start it up. I mean, it was, I don't know what the idea was behind that. I get it. We've got Sarkov's offices full of, artifacts and stuff from medieval to, like the, olden times, medieval to where Blake 7 is shot, certainly. But, crazy. And
how would Blake know to wind it up?
Exactly.
You'd never even seen one until about 10 minutes earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. Get out of the way. I can do that. It's yeah.
The only other little thing as well was obviously that there had been a lot of attention to detail with that set design in Zarkov's office. I couldn't find a picture of it on the internet, but of course, those eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed the picture of Winston Churchill hanging in the on the wall in the back. And the interesting story behind that was that that was the portrait that Winston Churchill hated. He hated that actual painting of himself, to the point where his wife actually burnt it. So why on earth Pennant insisted on having that particular thing hanging in the office, I really, really don't know, but it was there. And it does get a mention in a couple of Blake 7 fanzines that I've got, that particular, because people are saying, is that Winston Churchill on the wall? Yeah, it is. So that explains that anyway. But overall, Pennant's definitely not my favourite director of Blake 7, so I think we all agree on that. Okay, thoughts on the best and worst special effects and costumes in this. Lynn, I'll let you go first this time.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So I suppose the best, and we've talked about it. I mean, there's not much in the way of big special effects, but the Sarkov's residence, they called it. So they've painted the walls sort of space silver, which I quite liked. Which I'm pretty sure nothing too much in that. So he said it was all 20th century artifacts, didn't he? And I like the fact, obviously, that some of those are mixed up. And he said was it a typical residence of the period? So that's all mixed up, and that's the type of thing you would expect, I guess, if well, maybe not, but if you've lost a little bit of history, whatever it is. So I thought that worked well, and there was a lot going on in there, and it was kind of fun to spot things, so on. So I like that. I would have said that the tower was a great special effect, but we've talked about that. It's not. That was one of the easiest things that they could do. The stun gas pistols didn't work in any way at all. They didn't look, even when you had that, and he actually showed those close-ups of them stunning Blake, and that didn't help at all, because they didn't look any more effective. In fact, probably even less than they would have done. Neck collars were sparkly, I guess. Nice and 70s are sparkly, but pretty flimsy. Oh, and the only other one I kind of spotted was the little comms device. So I suppose the walkie-talkie comms thing, little block that Cheney had. I mean, it's the 70s, so I guess it was probably people wouldn't have commented on much at the time, but now it kind of sticks out a little bit. But those are all the ones I picked up. It wasn't really an effects episode, was it? We only had a couple of shots of the Liberator in space, but nothing else really that that they needed. So
and your favorite costume?
Favorite costume. Oh, come on! You have to credit the leopard print again. I liked it. It was fun and different from everything. There's Blake still in his space anorak, very serious. But the first thing you see is that. It's like, great, absolutely excellent. And I have to mark down the space Arabs. There's no real. Again, it's the 70s, but that type of stereotyping, whatever you want to call it, didn't work at all for me.
Okay, the Omar Sharif lookalike.
Yes, okay,
that's exactly what I've got written down.
Is it? Go on, Dave. Over to you.
Omar Sharif lookalike.
Go on, Dave. Give us your views on the effects and the costumes.
Well, far be it from me to disagree with Lynn, but Call's outfit, sponsored by Primark, I think. They're selling those in Primark, those tops, aren't they? I wasn't too impressed with it. Hey?
I don't know.
Well, of course, you won't shop at Primark, Lynn, but us in the Northeast have to, don't we, Stephen?
Speak for yourself.
So, yeah, I didn't like that at all. Effects, well, the car doing 5 miles an hour wasn't an effect, but when it went through the barrier, it was quite clever that it smashed the barrier. I give them credit for not trying to show the actual car crash itself, but then you had that, Steve. That's right. So that was just as bad. Yeah, they dodged a bullet by not trying to show the car crash, but then they had the guards giving it all of this. I didn't understand that. What else have I got for special effects? Well, I'm showing myself up now because I've got the Blackpool Tower painted on top of the castle. Was very effective, wasn't it? But then Nick tells us it was real.
It is.
And he was there, and he's been there.
Yeah. It's called Waterloo.
That's the worry. That's the worry. I hope that wasn't a family holiday.
No, it wasn't.
No, thank God for that. The gas guns, which Lynn's already mentioned, and you're right about the close-up. On one of the close-up, it shows you the guy pumping it with his thumb. So it must be some sort of water pistol. But I mean, he's pumping it with his thumb to get the gas to come out. So that was poor. And the introduction of cartoon white stars for explosions. Twice in this episode, we get these big white stars on the screen to cover an explosion. That was something quite new, and again, not very effective. And I think that's all I've got, really.
Okay, Neil.
Okay. Best costume is Ali's leopard print jacket. For me. Worst costume. I'm going to give Avon's black with shiny silver number a bit of a mention here, with the dark green jumper underneath is awful. But it is, of course, the Amagons outfits. They look like they've come from an Aladdin panto. They're shocking.
Oh no, they don't.
They're really bad in my opinion. For special effects, I haven't really got a best one because there's not a lot of special effects within this. To be fair, I tend to not mention sets of special effects, but if we're going to do that, then it is the inside of Sarkov's palace, which is the best one. The worst special effects, the neck braces, they get built up throughout the second part of the episode as being capable of blowing someone's head off. We get to see a neck brace exploded finally when Villa releases one and Blake throws it at the Amagons and goes boom. And what do we get? White flashing stars on the screen. They're truly awful, as Dave said. It's a shocker. I don't know who thought that up, but it doesn't work at all. So that's the worst special effect for me.
Okay, Nick.
As has already been said, there's not a lot of effects to go for. I thought in terms of best effects, there was a nice shot of the Liberator in front of the planet towards the end. I think I wrote it down on 49 minutes on the Blu-ray. I thought that was quite a nice effect. I hadn't written down any for the worst effects, but then listening to Lynn and the others, I would agree that those gas guns were a bit on the naff side.
Yeah.
Best costume.
They were dribbling water, weren't they?
They were,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
They're probably spraying the garden afterwards with them.
Death by water pistol. I don't know.
Best costume. I still like the Federation Guards, although I'll mark them down for the bad running, but I think the actual costumes themselves are great. And the worst costume is just dead easy. It's the Amagons. No question.
Yeah, the Amagons for me for worst costume, definitely. And yeah, it's the Liberator for me. The Liberator really it comes into its own. I did like the interior of Sarkov's office. I mean, it showed a little bit of something a bit different. But yeah, not a great deal to go on. On this, the worst thing was the car. I mean, it was just so completely out of place. It really, I get why they had it, but it was just, there was no need for it. And it just made the escape farcical. It really, really did. So yeah, for me, that was just completely unnecessary. And yeah, overall, Callie's costume has to be the winner for me on this one. It's we start the episode with it, and it's good. I mean, Tice was that costume was okay, but the rest of the crew all really stuck with the usual stuff. Villa had a jazzy jester kind of number on again, but yeah. Poor Gan stuck in the same clothes, from day one, isn't he? And doesn't really get much variation. No wonder he wants to go on the ship and just get somebody to shoot it with the kind of involvement he's got in this program at the moment. Okay, moving on to the best and worst actor. Okay, we'll come back to you, Nick, on this one first.
Okay, I thought T.P. McKenna as Sarkov did a good job in this sort of broken politician who was all self-pitying and down on himself. So I thought he was a very good guest actor. But I would say for a portrayal of a character as it should have been throughout, I would say Jan Chappell got marks for this episode from me. I thought she was really good. In terms of the worst actor, I don't actually know the guy's name, but second place would be Mark Zuber as Tarwin. But I think that was probably more down to the script than his actual acting. So the worst actor was towards the end, where Blake and the gang escaped from that cell, Blake launches one of these neck things at this guard who's very, very slowly raising up the weapon just in time to be killed. And he was the worst.
All right, Neil.
Right, best. I had 3 written down. So in honorable third it was TP McKenna. So I think he did a good job with a guest part, and went through all the pompous, self-pitying, grandiose, reinvigorated, all in one, all the way through. And I just think, even though the character was a bit larger than life, he pulled it off. So I thought he did that well. Jan Chappell does hold out well in this episode as well, and does a good job, and gets to play Callie as Callie, which is refreshing and nice to see. But for me, it was Sally Nivette, because I just think that she's in charge of the Liberator for that period of time, and I think she pulls that off well. And again, it is her playing the part as it was meant to be, I think. So I think that's refreshing. And going back to that script point, and the Chris Boucher had to pad it out, I'm still wondering how much of both for Jan and Sally that was for Chris's hands, to be honest with you. Worst actor, I just think I can't believe Tarvin. I just can't believe the character. I can't believe that he ever had any kind of relationship with Jenna. I just can't see it. So it just doesn't work for me. So for that reason, the character doesn't work. But that might be the writing in the script. I don't know. But I'm just going to go with Mark Zuber for them reasons.
Okay, Dave.
Best actor, Tommy Steele.
In
That's
this
the song.
episode,
Tommy Steele.
the record.
Tommy Steele singing the blues.
Correct.
I see. Is that who it was? Wow.
Do pay attention.
I mean,
have you guys watched this?
We're catching up. We're catching up now. Yeah.
Blake broke records, and he broke one in that. Certainly, it was Tommy Steele's record.
Tommy Steele singing the blues. Fantastic, that was. Great to hear it. I mean, the rest of the acting was all pretty much on a par for me, I thought. Villa is interesting in this because he had some very good interactions with Avon, as you know, has been developed in recent episodes. So I enjoyed that. But I totally disagree with Lynn that he's seen where he's running from the bridge of the ship, because Zen tells him that's not gone. And then he stops, he does a double take, and he opens his mouth and he turns around. I thought that was so poor, that particular bit. I thought that was really, really badly done. But I guess collectively it's the Federation Guards that are the worst actors in this episode for me.
All right. And Lynn?
Fair enough. So I had I still had the honourable mention to Michael Keating. I think it's a very Villa thing to do, is effectively what we saw in that sort of indecision and going backwards and forwards. And it becomes, in some respects, more Villa later. So that's probably why I like it. But I agree with Neil. Sally Nivette was just, I thought she was just great. It was just a really proper portrayal of the character. So she gets my top vote. I didn't like Mark York as Cheney. I mean, I thought it was good to see a person, it was good to see a Federation trooper, and it's good to see him talking, and he's got one of the hinged helmets, which is nice. But I just didn't like him. I just didn't think it was all very sort of by the book, and all of the red standby and red alert so on didn't really work for me. So
yeah, I did have that written down, but I didn't go there because Steve mentioned Mark York earlier, and I was just wondering whether he knew him or something.
No, I don't know. But all right.
But those are mine.
All right. I mean, obviously, Cheney, Mark York, I actually thought he portrayed it quite well. I did quite enjoy his part in this. I thought Corinthia West's Tice was excellent. I do think that this was a strong female script. Certainly stronger for those characters, as we've already mentioned. But as a guest actor, very, very well played by Corinthia. So I've got to be honest, though, it has to come between Jan Chappell and Sally Nivette. I couldn't really split them. Sally maybe just edges it because she had more to do in this episode, and she had that the espionage part of it, the double bluff, and she had a lot more to do in this. So probably Sally Nivette just edges it, but I thought Jan was great in this as well. So good one for the ladies. This particular script. Okay, coming towards the end of the show, best line of the show. I'll come back to you then, Lynn. What's your feelings on this one?
Excellent. I get the first one. Okay, because I've got 5. So I'm going to pick one of the Villa Avon ones. So it's Villa with "But I'm entitled to my opinion," and Avon's "It's your assumption that we are entitled to it as well that is irritating." It's absolutely classic of the two, and therefore I like it.
Avon foreseeing social media.
Good stuff. I love the way that Lynn's always got 5 now, because we've learned as this podcast has gone on that we're all just pick one and then somebody's nicked it. Now I've got to rapidly find another one. Okay, Dave, what was your favourite line in this?
There was a few interactions between Avon and Villa which were good, but the line near the beginning, civilization has always depended on courtesy rather than truth.
Yeah,
I thought that was quite profound.
Yeah.
So that was my favourite line. I can give you a worse line as well, which is the conversation between Jenna and Omar Sharif about their time in the mountains. Which I just thought was ridiculous, but there you go.
Okay, Neil.
So my one that I liked, and I'm going to go a little bit. There was one that I was going to pick, but I'm going to leave that. I liked the little Tarvin in Sarkov. You talk too much, and Sarkov being a politician, yes, it's an occupational hazard. So I quite like that. So I'm very, very. I think it fits in with today. Maybe it did back then as well. I don't know, but it certainly does now.
Okay, Nick.
Well, I have several written down, and Lynn pinched one of them there. But I think the other one, as a backup, is really good, and it comes from Villa after Avon had sort of backed him up, and Villa says he agrees with me. Makes it all seem worthwhile somehow.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
After reading Terry Nation's Syria reference, I went back through Sarkov's script, because I thought obviously Sarkov is the man who, Blake is trying to persuade, to go back and run his country. And I love the line that Sarkov gives in their conversation, where he says, "Assassination has always been a legitimate tool of statecraft. Its respectability and public acceptance has varied from civilization to civilization, but its practical application has remained remarkably consistent." And then he plays the record. But I love that line. Great line. Great delivery as well. A wonderful. I didn't mention it earlier, but a wonderful performance from T.P. McKenna, a great guest actor in this particular episode. Okay, we finish off by giving our marks out of 10 for this episode. And Nick, what have you given this one?
Well, as I said at the beginning, I've got fond memories of this one as a kid, and I enjoyed watching it this time round. It's got its plot holes, but I forgive it, and I would give it a 7.
A 7 out of 10 for Nick. Neil?
I'm torn a little bit. It's just getting to a 6. Just
getting to a 6. Dave?
4.
4. I think that's your...
It's possibly me joint lowest. It's. We basically spent an hour talking about all the plot holes. So that's a lot of plot holes, So I know 4's the low score, but if the Arabs had arrived on space camels, I might give it a 5.
Lynn?
Actually, similarly to Nick, I enjoyed it, even though we have spent the hour talking about all the things that aren't so great about it. And watching it again, I've still enjoyed it enough to give it a 7.
Okay, well, that wraps up Bounty by Terry Nation. I am going to give it a 6.5. Not quite a 7. Not quite a 7 for me.
He's a half eater. You can't let him get away with that, Dave.
He's half. You're turning into
Go on,
bloody
Steve,
Neil.
Which
He
way are you going?
thinks halves as well, doesn't
Did
he?
it once, I can't ever do it again after the grief you gave me. So
No,
Oh,
you
never
can't
do
give
it.
halves.
I'm giving it
Come
a
on.
7. I'm giving it a 7 then. There we go.
Ah,
It's getting a
dear
7.
peer pressure. Peer pressure. That's what that is.
It's getting marked. It's getting marked down slightly because of the car and the Federation guards. But that concludes our latest podcast. We will be back in 4 weeks' time. Date to be confirmed. Thank you everybody for tuning in across all the various platforms. If you are watching on YouTube, please jump onto YouTube, search The Word on Blake 7. See you next month. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye,
The
everybody.
word, switch the bracelet on the word, the word, switch the bracelet on the word, the word, switch the bracelet on the word,